Well, let's get talking now. As the May 29 handover date draws near, the incoming president, that's the president-elect, Mr. Bola Tinubu, expert says faces a series of daunting economic challenges, including a growing budget deficit, insecurity, amongst other economic woes. The new administration, again, many say will be greeted by a worried public bedeviled by poverty, high inflation rate, unemployment, and recent planned subsidy removal by the outgoing government, plus the recommendation from the IMF that there is need to raise taxes to generate more revenue to settle the nation's debt. Well, I'm being joined via Zoom by partner with Deloitte Nigeria, Mr. Olumide Esong, to discuss some of these burning economic issues facing Nigeria as a country. Mr. Esong, thank you so much. It's been a while. It's good to have you on the program.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, Tulu, for having me, and good afternoon, viewers.
Well, let's start with the cash crunch issue, which we grappled with towards the last quarter of last year, and of course the first quarter of this year, or the first 2-3 months of this year. What do you think are the lessons learned, number one, and what impact do you think this would have moving on? Some businesses are still down. They are yet to get back, despite the fact that CBN has allowed the bid of the old notes to coexist with the new notes.
So thanks, Tolu. First thing first, I think there are always two sides to the coin. So whilst we went through a lot of pain as Nigerians during those 2 quarters, there are lessons learned, one of which is the fact that we need to be more structured about well-intended programs such as that. The last time we spoke, I did mention that, United Kingdom took 18 months to change the currency. The last time they changed the £20 note. And so we didn't have to put ourselves under so much, pressure as a nation. But having said that, we also had some good sides to it, one of which was that we had reduced cases of kidnapping during the period in question, which is, of course, the fact that there wasn't really cash what really helped. The flip side of that as well is the fact that we don't know what happens again when we have enough currency, available. If you look at inflation, we had a budget of 17.16 as budget for 2023, for example, and now we are already on 22.04%. My fear is that could get worse when there is enough currency in circulation, because by not having enough currency in circulation, what has happened is there is some form of control on demand for goods and services, really, which is something that might relapse once we have enough currency in circulation. You may see demand pull inflation all over again. So although our inflation has always been more of cost push, but if you have so much currency around, then you may have demand pull inflation as well. So I think on the whole, we need to manage this better. Let's be more structured about how we run our affairs as a nation, and then we avoid the untold hardship that was visited on Nigerians in the last 2 quarters with respect to that. Well, but I think we should look beyond that and look forward now. What we do, we have a plethora of economic issues that we are confronted with, and I think the new government will need to focus on those issues and tackle them head on.
I would say that it's not bad to go cashless. We saw what happened in Kenya with M-Pesa, very effective. But technology has to also play a role in all of this. I would ask you, many would say it's like Nigeria wasn't really ready for this move. We just jumped into it and didn't follow up. Do you think our banks have the capacity, the technological capacity, to manage the volume of transactions that we'll do online if we are to embrace this policy in totality?
Yes, Tolu, whatever you're prepared for, you're better able to handle such. The banks weren't prepared for that level of increase in e-banking. And so you saw practically all the banks struggling. Of course, the case is not helped by the Japa syndrome. So all the IT eggheads have also, the popular saying, talent finds its way to where it is best rewarded. So you've also found a lot of those IT gurus who have left the shores of Nigeria. So that was certainly a factor. But our e-systems were overwhelmed. You have to just admit that. But even having said that, I think maybe one related item also is the fact that the cashless that we were forced to undertake within those 2 quarters also highlighted the fact that a larger portion of this country still operates in the informal economy. You saw the impact on our economy, and that tells you that we still have a huge amount of informal economy that operated outside of the e-systems. The villages, where most transactions are still cash-based, were stranded. It impacted, food products and transportation from the farms to the cities. So it's a good thing to develop the tech infrastructure, but it has to be intended, it has to be intentional, and I think that is where we struggled. The banks have made significant progress, on the apps, with the online transactions, but I think they were not just prepared for that, huge spike in online and digital transactions which happened then. Lessons, of course, have been learned, but I think that it wasn't just about the banks alone. I think it would be unfair to say the banks were not prepared, but I think it's also the fact that we had this Java issue, which we all have to deal with as Nigerians during that time, and so a lot of the IT superstars had left, and so it left a lot of our institutions literally struggling. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Well, let's now go to warnings, of course, for the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank meetings. A lot of warnings have actually come, not just Nigeria, but emerging economies like Nigeria, issues around debt, issues around revenue, and all of that. But let me ask you, which of that do you think we really need to take very seriously as we move on and expect a new administration to come on board? Which of all these comments, recommendations do you suggest?
We need to take everything very seriously. Wow. We have serious inflation issues. We're still trending upwards, notwithstanding, the tightening position taken by the central bank. Core inflation still increased from 18.84 to 19.86. Food inflation increased 24.45%. And the headline inflation itself moved from 21.96 to 22.04. And even if measured month on month, you still see an increase from 1.71% to 1.86% in March. So we have serious issues with inflation, and we must take it seriously. But I also agree that we have serious issues with debt. As of December 2022, at World Bank says we have 46.25 trillion in debt. 60% of that as domestic debt. The initial projection was that at the time this current regime will hand over, we should be on 77 or thereabout trillion if the ways and means were to be added to our debt profile alongside. So we have a debt problem. Now, you can always challenge whether it's such a big issue if we had enough revenue, because our debt to GDP is still really very within band. It's still under 40%. So it's okay if you look at it in isolation. But what you cannot do is to look at it in isolation for a country that the tax to the GDP ratio is between 6 and 7%. It's one of the lowest in the world. So the World Bank going ahead, and IMF and recommending, that we increase taxes. It's born out of concern that we have one of the lowest tax to GDP ratios in the world. We probably have the lowest VAT rate in Africa, but yet we have multiplicity of taxes, which the organized private sector has complained about over time. So anyhow you look at the issues or you dissect them, we have serious issues in our hand, and I think the work of the incoming government is well cut out already. We have to deal with subsidy. It's either we deal with subsidy or subsidy will kill us as a nation. With 3.6 trillion budgeted for the first half of 2023 alone. The question is we have to tackle it head on. But I also recognize that this is beyond an economic issue is socio-economic in nature, because we're also talking about the survival of 200 million Nigerians. So taking subsidy out, there must be something else. Some social investment scheme to compensate and take care of the vulnerable, because we must look after the vulnerable in our society. So while we struggle with all of this, we also have the debt service issue on our hands as well. Like the World Bank said, 96% of 2022 revenue.
Let's move on quickly. Rate hike by the Apex Bank, let's say the monetary side, has been the order of the day, not just in Nigeria, but also in other countries. But it seems not to be working here. At the moment, NPR is at 18%. Inflation is about, like you said, 22.04%. So why is that not working for us? And how, in specifics, do you think we can at least rein in inflation?
Okay, so and that's a good question. And so let me start by saying that we're not an island, so we have studied what is happening in the rest of the world, and we just try to follow through. But I think that we must understand the dynamics and the factors driving the inflation in our country may be different from the other part of the. For example, we have what I call imported inflation as part of the factors we're dealing with. So, we are import-dependent nation, and sometimes we import goods from countries who are suffering inflation as well. So that's an imported inflation. Also, we have significant issues with foreign exchange. That is also contributing to imported inflation in Nigeria. So we have issues around food supply, security of food supplies, because of issues like insecurity and infrastructures and transportation issues. Those are peculiar. So, seeking for an inflation busting interest rate necessarily solve our problem in Nigeria. Inflation busting interest rate may problem in Nigeria. Now, to look at it globally, some countries have been able to successfully arrest the inflation rates. If you look at it globally, US is down to 5% now. China is down to 0.7%. Those are improvements. Only UK, the big economics is still nudging up. UK went to 10.4%. I mean, even if we look locally within Africa, it seems to be coming down. Ghana is down to 45%, and Angola is down to 10.81%. So globally, I think the monetary policies are beginning to arrest inflation, and we already be seeing some of those monetary policy rates peaking at some of the countries. For Nigeria, that's not necessarily the case. And that is why, I highlighted earlier that we need to look at the local factors which monetary policy cannot address. If you're dealing with the cost of inflation, it's difficult to arrest it monetary policies only, because it's not about increasing the number of people demanding for a few goods, whereas you want to constrain the number of people able to demand for it. No, that monetary policy rate will not help you with that. You need to deal with those underlying cost issues. Energy costs. Even when the prices are falling elsewhere in the world, energy cost is still extremely high in Lagos. Diesel cost is high in our country. We have to deal with the issue of energy costs, which is a fundamental one. If you just think for a moment that subsidy will be removed, I leave you to imagine what it will also mean for inflation. So because then it contributes to energy costs, and then it would only make inflation to unfortunately. I mentioned earlier imported inflation, because some of the countries we're even importing from are also dealing with inflation. We have elevated food costs in Nigeria, which of course due to a number of things. One, we have insecurity issues around where most of the production takes place, which also you argue one way or another that should have been fixed. But also we have issues with midstream processing. We don't have processing plants, we don't have transportation infrastructure where would have helped us to control the seasonality of some of these food stuff. We've not made significant investment in storage. And also that may be linked to power, because if you're going to be storing things, you need to be able to control the conditions, and then that comes to power. We're struggling with power, and that's an infrastructure issue. So when you look at the issues around, costs generally, and then basket them as cost push inflation, it's not going to be addressed by a monetary policy. It has to be addressed by fiscal policy. Government needs to spend more on infrastructure, for example, to fix both the issues around midstream, transportation storage, but also around energy costs. So that is where the new government will need to focus on.
Before I let you go, Mr. Son, let's talk around oil, the oil market. Nigeria, of course, we expect proceeds from crude and all of that, but we are also grappling with oil theft, which is something that everyone says the coming administration needs to face head on. What are you thinking about the oil market, and what sort of proceeds should we be expecting as we move on in the year?
So I think one thing that we've all now come to appreciate is that, energy transition is going to be a journey, okay? Energy transition is not going to be a revolution. It will mean a deliberate evolution from carbon-intensive energy source to less carbon-intensive energy source. To the extent that we appreciate that, we know that, oil and gas are in play for a long time to come. More importantly, that gas, having been classified as sustainable fuel, will be in play for a long time to come. That would help to stabilize, I would say, the oil price over the long term. Now, in the 80s, should Nigeria be profiting more? Yes, we should. But we have two types of issues we are dealing with in Nigeria at the moment. One is the issue of crude theft. The other is the decline investment in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria over the past decade. You would have thought that with the passage of the PIA into law, that would start to arrest that. Yes, it would start addressing it, but there are other fundamental issues which have to be taken care of, one of which is the crude theft you mentioned. Because there has been underinvestment in the oil and gas sector over a long time. We are dealing with the consequence of that. I mean, there was an article not too long ago about the investment around Africa between 2015 and 2019 of almost $50 billion, and Nigeria only had like $3 to $5 billion of that. So investment has not been coming in. And so what you have is declining production, which must be arrested. And then you also need to invest additionally for growth. The way the oil fields work, it has natural decline. So, a field that started producing 100,000 barrels, over the coming years will start to, decline to 80, to 60, to 40. So first, you need to make this set of investment that is called, the ones you invest to arrest the decline, to ensure that you are able to maintain your 100,000 barrels a day over a long time from time. But then you need to make the secondary investment to enable you increase production capacity. From 100,000, you are aiming to shoot to 150,000 barrels from that particular well. You need to make the secondary set of investment to increase production. Now, both the investment to maintain existing production and the investment to increase production has been dwindling and has been lacking in the Nigerian oil and gas industry for over a decade now. And so there is a lot of work to be done in that space. Government would have to show seriousness. Government will have to incentivize investors. Government will have to provide security to investors to say, look, your investments are safe, and we are committed to ensuring that we both mutually profit from this, oil price outlook over the long time to come by guaranteeing your investment here and you making the investment in Nigeria.
Interesting stuff. It's a good way to live it, Mr. Olumide. So I must thank you so much for your insight into all of these burning economic issues. They are all burning, affecting us, everyone around the space. Thank you so much as a partner with Deloitte Nigeria. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, too. Thank you for having me.